Well, it's a good evening in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, and it's now 9 o'clock, back to normal time in the UK. And my co-host Andrena is sitting there in the UK, and she's got this amazing guy, Rory Duff. And so we'll start the show tonight, and I'll pass it over to Andrena.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are in the world, or if you're listening to the replay, welcome. And on this beautiful sunny Thursday morning here in the UK, it's my pleasure to have Rory Duff on the show. Because there's so many things I want to ask you. So I've been guided through different people. Get in touch with Rory Duff. He's written books. He does Leylines. He does Dowsing. He does this. He does that. So here we are. So I've read some of your bio, and there's lots of little things I would like to ask you. So first of all, I would like to say welcome. And would you like to start off how your journey started? What took you on the path? I know you did gold mining in Africa, and you've talked about synchronicity. So would you like to start from the very beginning of how your life has unfolded to where you are now?
Wow. Well,
in a nutshell.
Jeff, thank you very much for inviting me on to your show. It's much appreciated. Well, where did it all start? And this is actually made me stop and think a little bit about how we all start our lives. And I would invite people to look back at what their very first decision was in their lives that they made themselves, as opposed to other people making it for them. And mine was at the age of 13. I was asked whether I wanted to study geology or history. And I guess that was a bit of a no-brainer for me, really. But it was my decision. And I started studying geology, and then I just found that the teacher was just incredibly enthusiastic, and that enthusiasm inspired me to learn, and learning became more easy. So I ended up going to the university in London to study geology. But it was about decisions and how we make decisions. And one of the most important things that I discovered, not at that time, but later, was how we make a decision-making strategy. And what is our decision-making strategy to elicit the truth? And how does that change from the way we make decisions on what to eat and drink and things like that? So fairly early on, I was beginning to look at, well, how do I navigate my way through life? What do I want to do? And what should I be doing? And it's very easy to get caught up with what other people want you to do. Fortunately, I had a couple of things which really helped, and that was synchronicity. Yes, the synchronicity and intuition led me to working in Africa in the gold mines, and life was very different with the reality of living in, and working 7,000 feet underground with death was all around you. I mean, literally, it was commonplace, and you're in danger underground all the time. There's a couple of occasions where if I'd been standing somewhere minutes earlier, or minutes later, I'd actually been crushed. And that's the story most people can tell you when they work underground. And following from that, you end up realizing that you suppress your fears. And when you do suppress your emotions, because when you're young, you sort of think you can do everything. You actually surface what surfaces elsewhere is more sort of chaos. And for me, it started with chaotic living up on the surface, to the extent that I was burning the candle at both ends, till I got to the point where I was about to break down, had it not been for a pretty major synchronicity where I was introduced to the work of Rudolf Steiner by two separate people on the same weekend. And the fortune, one of them had a whole library of Steiner books, which were probably the only Steiner books for about 500 miles around. So So that kind of got me on the initial road. But then also there's a senior geologist on the mines called me up and said, "Come, Rory, we're going to look for water." And I said, "Cool, fine." And the farmers locally used to ring us up to try and find water 30, 40 meters down, because they have limestone and you need to find the channels of water there. And when we pulled up at this farm, he just opened the boot and pulled out these dowsing rods. And I'm thinking, yeah, what? What's going on? And he said, "Oh, we know water's here, Rory. We just don't know exactly precisely where, but the rods will tell us." And so we did. We would douse for water for these farmers and arrange for drill crew. And of course, that was the opening point where if you didn't get the dowsing right, you didn't hit the water. But what was quite shocking was that we always got the water. And we used to practice on the mine lawns with sprinkler systems and the pipes. You could actually douse for where the pipes or the water were that fed the sprinkler systems. And then the feedback there was you press the dowsing rod down under the surface of the grass and you can feel the pipe.
Wow.
So dowsing and feedback, that loop, that learning loop, became really interesting. And of course, it opened my whole mind up to what on earth is going on here. You know, I'm naturally far too curious in my life, and curiosity is wonderful. I found out later in dowsing, it kills dowsing. You have to ask the question, being curious, but then when you go into that sort of mode of getting information back from your subconscious, you have to wipe out all curiosity. You have to increase massive uncertainty, so you're not influencing the results. Dowsing became this incredible journey of discovery for me, and it led me to further synchronicities, which are so for me, decision making, following synchronicity, exploring that, and being massively curious started me off.
Wow. And you obviously never done dowsing before, didn't even know what dowsing was.
I wouldn't say that I didn't know what dowsing was. I think I sort of labeled it as one of these fringe things. I was sort of embedded within science, and I was really fortunate to study geology back in the back in the late 70s, because it was an emerging science back then, and we were already at the cutting levels of research and trying to work out what was going on in the world of geology. So that added to the sense of excitement when we looked at rocks and finding new minerals. That was absolutely fascinating. So dowsing was just one of these things which were, well, we don't know about that, and I haven't really considered it, and didn't do too much with it until I came back to the UK, when I discovered Hamish Miller's work on the St Michael alignment and finding the Michael and Mary lines, and I'm thinking, well, I'm living, you know, not far from one of these lines. I was living down in Devon, in near Exeter, and I literally went to the church at Crediton, or the Holy Cross Church there, and spent an hour walking around this church, just trying to, okay, well, they're supposed to be here. What can I find? And after an hour, I was picking up both lines, and I thought, well, this is cool. Then at the time I was doing Aikido, learning about human energies and how to use chi energy to essentially do some quite phenomenal feats within Aikido. And I wouldn't say that I was good, but I was training with people who were phenomenally good at using ki. So I was then looking, well, what is this energy? In the early stages, I thought, well, it could be something to do with gravity. So I started off with that hypothesis that this was moving our gravitational fields and the Earth's gravitational fields, and just carried on exploring. And then I through synchronicity, again, I came across a chap called Ron Pearson, who was the most amazing scientist you could ever come across. And as the synchronicity unfolded, I moved to Chippenham in Wiltshire, which was very close to where he lived. So I moved from Devon to Wiltshire, and we both had boxer dogs, and we spent 15 years together until he passed over. And I was helping him with his theories on the creation of the universe. He had it all, but he was a really amazing engineering physicist. And he didn't like the Big Bang theory, didn't like the relativity theory, and set out to try and find the answer to the creation of the universe. And he did, but he had this unfortunate side effect. This is a university lecturer from Bath University in fluid dynamics and thermodynamics, and he was also he was an inventor. He invented the gas wave turbine, and this thing he put together from theory, and he built it. Actually built this thing himself. And when he started it up, it ran first time for 400 hours. It's quite unbelievable engineering feat to be able to take something from theory and put it into it. But anyway, this theory on the creation of the universe ended up having this rather unfortunate side effect from it. It explained how intelligence must have arisen that went on to create everything, like some sort of supercomputer at the subquantum level. So for 15 years, I was immersed in really challenging science and realizing that relativity is just the most immense hoax that have been put on the human race, because it denies the background, it denies the existence of an intelligence, and we're beginning to find with the electric universe theory that dark matter. They spent billions trying to find dark matter and failed miserably. Over 50 or 60 papers this last year have shown they cannot find dark matter. Black holes are completely unfalsifiable. They are pseudoscience. And if we get rid of relativity theory and we realize actually there is intelligence behind the universe, we survive after death. And this changes everything. And if you think about how we should progress forward, it's only in the last few hundred years that we've been immersed in this science which says, look, when you're dead, you're dead. Your mind is nothing more than brain function. This is rubbish.
Yeah.
There's so much information that says otherwise. And now we have science that has unbelievable science which connects up. He has a fully unified theory of quantum gravity. But the physicists won't accept it because it doesn't need relativity theory. And all the physicists which are stuck with these establishments, all their funding is dependent on big military organizations and governments who will not fund anything that actually stops the religion of relativity. And as soon as we get rid of that, and then we accept that we have this intelligence behind the universe that went on to create everything and continually creates things, and that fits with so many of the old sayings and the old cultures, and even with explaining things like healing and telepathy. All of that is completely natural and explained by this theory. And of course, this theory was massively suppressed by physicists like Penrose and all that. But it provides us, if you like, with this wonderful foundation with regards to what we do. And it begins to explain that this universal consciousness is connected to very, very low vibrations. And this began to provide us with an answer of what these earth energies were about and how they're formed. And
what do you call that theory? Sorry, what is that theory called?
It's the big breed theory is replacing the Big Bang theory. More information is on his website, ronpearson.com. He has passed over now, but he's written 6 books, which I helped him write, which start from the beginners all the way up to the really deep science with mathematics. And my role is in many ways to promote his work. This most amazing, gentle, humble man who reached his 90s, and I was blessed to share so much time with him, just helping him understand him. And he introduced me to so many other things. He was asked to join circles where we sat in circle together with some amazing mediums. He was continually being asked to look at free energy devices. So I was immersed in the world of understanding how this was possible, because his theory explained that. And again, another reason why relativity theory was heavily pushed and promoted was because Tesla had discovered how to tap into the free energy in the universe, which would have meant independent energy could be used for everything, for lighting the world, as Tesla has described he could do. And of course, that didn't sit with people like JP Morgan. No, and it was all about some small group of selfish parasites wanting to own the world. And this is the game we're all in right now. But the other side of it is this awakening where actually, well, for me, it was following synchronicity. And I guess if there's anything that I would suggest is if we all do that, we follow this sort of vocational path and synchronicity. This is essentially, you get two bits of information from separate sources which are related at a time in your life when you need it. It's like, this is how you can be sure this is guidance for you fulfilling your role in life. And if many more people started thinking, well, that's actually, I need to work on synchronicity, just to be guided by that, well, the world will be traveling in the direction we need to be traveling. And it's an incredibly exciting experience because, I mean, when it strikes, it just blows your mind. And it's not just physical things. We connect up in the dream world. We're in a dream group that I'm with. We end up having dreams between us, and then events during the morning even now, which are connected causally, and that is now giving us a collective direction as to where we're going and what we should be doing. So, and this matches absolutely Steiner's prediction of moving from an individual consciousness to group consciousness, and this is the awakening, moving from the fifth epoch to the sixth epoch. So we're looking at one of the books I wrote was called Grail Bound, and to mention how I got onto the Grail subject, because that was a bit of a it came out, a bit of a curveball that came out. But there's this universal prophecy that we get snippets from cultures and different people from around the world, ancient and modern, that are saying the same thing, that we're in this cyclic, this great 12,000-year cycle where the energetic environment changes, and that changes in our minds. It mutates ourselves, and it changes the way we view the world and how we interact with each other, and it's happening right now. And what brought me to this was just wondering, what on earth are these energy lines doing? Because they're changing, and that's probably the time to get back to the energies, because, you know, being curious, when I moved to Chippenham in Wiltshire, it was much nearer to Avebury, and so I thought, well, that's cool. I can do some dowsing around the Avebury complex, and there was a particular energy line that was mentioned at the end of The Sun and the Serpent, the book by Hamish, which it wasn't the Michael or Mary, but it was another short one that came out from the center of the circle there. So I thought I'd just set out and look for that, and the journey just continued, and I found lines going everywhere. And then I had a breakthrough point where there was a line passing right next to my house, and every morning at 8 o'clock I would take the dog out for a walk, and I noticed that the edge of this line was never quite in the same place. And so I thought, well, okay, what I'll do is I'll put a tape measure in a datum in the lawn, run it across the road, and every morning I would measure precisely the distance from datum where the edge of this energy line was, and it soon spread to, well, I have to measure the other side at the same time. And what I found was this energy line had a sort of pulsation. It would widen and contract and widen. So I did this for about 3 months, and I thought, well, I've got to do it more than just 8 o'clock every morning. So I ended up doing it every hour. So I was up at night going at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. And I began to see that this line had a slow movement one way and then a slow movement the other way. And there's a slide there, I think, that shows this side-to-side movement, which I thought, this is incredible. And no one had discovered the side-to-side movement of these energy lines before. And it would take...
Can I stop you there? Because that was one of the things I wanted to ask you, because they say, like in Australia, they call them song lines. Here is ley lines, and then you've got dragon lines. And so I just, from my point of view, I mean, I've been on many ley lines in different places. How do you know where a line starts and finishes, and you know, the difference between dragon lines and ley lines? Because I don't really know, you know, I know of them and I've worked on them, but I don't really know what the differences are. And, you know, like you're explaining now how you're measuring them. Is that how you started to measure exactly where they are, like through doing a dowsing using a rod, and you would get the feel of that where it stops? or was it intuitively you knew it's where it stopped?
Okay, there's a few questions in there, so I need to.
Yeah, there is, but they're all linked.
Yeah, the terminology we all use soon became obvious to me back then that we needed to unify the terminology so we could actually talk to each other about what we were finding. And that's one of the reasons which led to the book, the classification of ley lines and earth energies and nodes, which I showed you about. But essentially, if I start with the terminology, a ley line is a pretty straight alignment. It's also called a ley. Now, a ley was the straight track, which Alfred Watkins talked about, which is 5 or 6 points, like stone circles, or standing stones, hills, tumuli, churches, that are all in a straight line across the map. And that's an alignment. That's a ley, sometimes called a ley line. All those are the same thing. To be a true ley line or alignment, you have to have a pair of earth energy lines running along that alignment. Okay, so if you're looking at the St. Michael alignment that Hamish tracked across the UK, that has the St. Michael energy line and the St. Mary energy line running along it and crisscrossing it over again. So these earth energy lines curve and cross together and curve and cross together, but the alignment itself is just a straight alignment. So when you're talking about, for instance, the rainbow serpent that crosses Australia, that has a pair of earth energy lines that run along that alignment. Okay, so that if you're talking about a song line, that is another line, another name for the alignment. If you're talking about the serpent's lines or the dragon lines, these are the same as the alignments, but each alignment has a pair of earth energy lines. And what I was discovering is that these energy lines have different groups with different frequencies. And I separated them out with the fact that, for instance, the type 4 energy lines, which I call them, they're the Michael and Mary lines, if you like, they have a movement of 12 hours going one way, 12 hours going the other way. So technically, it's got like a 24-hour frequency, which you actually would measure it down in the form of microhertz, which is something like in the region of 8 or 9 microhertz. It's incredibly slow movement, but it's not the slowest movement in the universe. I mean, the sun puts out there's a study called helioseismology, which actually measures the vibrations of the sun, and these are even slower than these waves that we're measuring side-to-side movement. But so when it comes to tracking these lines, I was tracking the earth energy lines that ran along the alignment. And initially, I just thought, well, do what any geologist does, is map them. And I'm very fortunate that I find it very easy to know where I am and where I'm going. I don't use sat nav. I don't need to. I just know where things are. So mapping is in 2 dimensions, by the way, was incredibly easy. I had to map 3-dimensionally underground and think 3-dimensionally with regards to fault systems and reefs and where it all was. So I spent 6 years actually mapping the northern part of Wiltshire to find out where these lines were and what they were doing, and that's when I began to study the characteristics and realize that they have groupings of different frequencies. And then it became obvious I needed to study several of them over a longer period of time, and I've noticed that these lines. Another feature of the different frequencies, the lines within a group of frequencies, like say the type 3 lines, they would all suddenly move exactly in sync. And the type 3 lines would all go to one side and then back the other side, and they would reach the end of the range of movement at precisely the same time. And that would happen in harmony for 2 days for roughly every 8 or 9 days. They would come into harmony for 2 days. I'm thinking, what on earth is going on here? And then another group would have a different harmony period over a longer time. But then the real eye-opener was 4 times a year, every single one of these energy lines all started moving exactly in harmony for about 3/4 of a day. And that was that was the day before the solstices and the equinoxes. And I'm thinking, well, that really doesn't make any sense. Why is it the day before the solstices and equinoxes? I mean, the special days was always the whole solstices and equinoxes. So this was just massively strange. And at that stage, I measured these lines when I was walking my dog every morning. I measured 12 lines for 18 months where their positions were, and begun to understand the differences in their movements. And at that point, another bit of synchronicity struck with regards to Ron, and a friend of his, a French medium called Brigitte Rix, sent both Ron and I details from what she'd been reading from a book called Seth Speaks, written by Jane Roberts, which was sold 7 million copies back in the 70s. She was channeling this this character called Seth and receiving information about the true nature of reality. And at that point, it was like she was explaining things called absolute coordinate points, what Seth was explaining, and I was reading what Brigitte had sent us, and this was just thinking, oh my goodness, she's describing nodes, these incredible nodes, but she was saying there was only 4 of these, or Seth was saying only 4 of these absolute coordinate points, but places of extreme power all around the world. I'm thinking, okay, well, if they're nodes, what's doing this? And at that point, when I have a very good friend who used to live in Devon called Carol Everett, who is just the most amazing healer. In fact, she's probably one of the few world's scientifically tested healers. She was flown to Denki University in Japan, where she was tested by a chap called Professor Yoshi, Professor Yoshi, I think his name was, and he had her wired up to an EEG machine. She was had a patient just been introduced to her, and this patient was just diagnosed that morning, and there was a thermal imagery scan on the patient, and she was flown 3,500 miles to just test her medical intuitive abilities. And within seconds, it's like, well, she has a tumor in her ovary. And you could see it on the thermal imagery scan, which Carol couldn't see. This is a red color area there. And the professor said, oh, we've just flown you all this way, and we've hardly got any data at all from your brainwaves. And she said, no, I can get rid of it. And at the distance of 2 meters all the time, so there's nothing close. And Fuji TV actually has the live footage of doing this, but they won't release it, funnily enough. And in 7 minutes, you can see the reddish area on the thermal imagery scan go back to a normal background blue color. So she got rid of this tumor, live TV, wired up, and you can see that her brainwaves on the left-hand side of her brain, she's completely shut down. It's just the right brain that's working. And so lovely lady, amazing healer. And she was living in Devon, right on top of this St. Mary line, naturally near Crediton. And that's where her clinic was. And I was there several times with her and dowsed the line. And anyway, so when she moved to Spain, about the time I was getting this information from Seth via Brigitte and Ron, she was telling me that she'd found this place up in the mountains with unbelievable energy. And I'm thinking, yeah, but you were on the Mary line, and you're telling me there's more than energy than that. And she says it's off the scale, and then she's sensitive to these things. So I began to think, okay, well, maybe there's something bigger and more powerful than these type 4 Michael and Mary lines. And that then another friend of mine connected with me called Manique, and he runs a healing practice in Kerala. And Manique, I mean, I took him to Avebury for the first time, and he's one of these people who can see these energies, and there aren't many of them, but goodness me, he could see when the vortices would pop up and then drop away again. And he told me about Mount Kailash, and when he went there, and the energies around Mount Kailash. So I started, okay, if there's 4 great places of power, 4 absolute coordinate points, where are they? And that led to the discovery of 3 emperor dragons that went around the world, and where you have 3 emperor dragons, which these are type 5 energy lines. Where they crossed over were in 6 places, but 2 of them were in the oceans. One of them was Mount Kailash. One of them was in Spain. And then there was one in New Zealand, and there was one in the Pacific, which I won't go into now. But at that point, I had something rather strange thing. I had a thing called what I call a snake dream. And the snake dream, because all I'd been doing up to now, I was just doing my own research. I was working as a training, someone who did training and communications as a coach for a large corporation. I was coaching people and things like that. So I'd done a change from geology, but it had allowed me to drive and take a different routes on the way home each day to complete my mapping project, to find out where these lines were. But the snake, so it was all my own research. I was working with a friend called Keith, and that was really important, where we actually would check each other's work, and he would check my dowsing and I would check his dowsing. So it's a sort of double blind way of progressing forward and learning of what these lines were about. But the snake dream kind of like told me it's time to sort of talk about it. And at that same time, I was given this sort of message, and you know, these things happen, that I had to go to Spain to repair these emperor dragons, but I couldn't do it on my own. And I had to find a group of people to go with. So that was a bit strange. Since I was given also within 2 months, I had to do it. At that point, the universe seemed to take over, and I did a talk in Glastonbury at the Positive Living Group down there, and I said, I need help to do something in Europe, but I can't tell you where. And three wonderful people came up to me afterwards, and one person said, I feel I'm supposed to be working with you. It's something to do with an anchor, but I don't know what that means. And I knew immediately what it was, because of what the energy work we had to do. And then one person said, I think I know it's in Spain. I can see an antenna there. And then he joined the group. And then a lovely man said, I think we've got the money for us. I can get this all together. And we were on the plane literally 3 weeks later. And the rest of that journey you can read in the book Grail Bound. Again, it was about the universe, but that took us to this incredible place in Murcia in southeast of Spain, where we having completed this amazing journey, where we were literally pawns in the hands of the universe. We were sort of puppet representatives of planet Earth. but at that point, we were then introduced again. The others are waking up with crazy things like saying, well, we've got to be here at a certain time, and we would go there, and someone would pop out and say certain things like, I was guided to come here, I need to show you something. And we were taken to this incredibly old ancient Bronze Age site, and that led to discovering about this place called La Bastida, which was around 5,000 years old. It was the Argaric nation there. They'd built this huge city. It was the largest mainland Bronze Age city in Europe, and it was on a small hill in the middle of nowhere, not on a trade route, not near water. It wasn't the highest mountain around, and the archaeologists were just baffled. And it had huge fortifications around it, and they found the items there matched similar things found on the other side of the Mediterranean, on the eastern Mediterranean. So the people had traveled and migrated all this way to this tiny place inland in southeast Spain now, and it was connected to where this node was. And it was that point when we started tracking the energy lines backwards, and one pair went north up through Spain and France and that. So my mapping has just now been mapping these energy lines. But that then led us to this incredible connection with the Knights Templar. We found so many of these Knights Templar places of prayer, both large and small, like Chartres Cathedral, Rocamadour, Monzone, and they were on these energy line intersections, on the really big energy line intersections. In fact, even just recently, I mean, it's quite unbelievable. There's a lady that came to our gathering in Oliver's Castle just last autumn for the autumn equinox harmony. She just went back to Spain and said, is there anything near me that I can meditate over here? And I just had a quick look on the map and I saw this intersection. I knew it was there, but I hadn't really investigated it. So I started zooming in to see if there was anything there which you could go to. And up pops this ruins of an old monastery right where the intersection is. And I started digging in, and hardly anyone knows about this monastery. And yet it was a 13th century Cistercian monk monastery. Now the Cistercian monk Bernard of Bernard of Clairvaux actually was one of the founding members of the Templars, and he said before it was a Cistercian monastery, it was a place where the Templars used to pray and meditate, and it was again on one of these intersections. And this is hardly known about, but back then we found out this connection to another incredible place called Caravaca de la Cruz, and the sanctuary there, which is on top of the hill. And again, this was an old Templar chapel, and from there on, I mean, we found this window there which had been blocked up, and it had all these crazy esoteric symbols around it with this meaning that no one had ever discovered or translated properly before. And it was on this really big intersection of energy lines, and so that led to the connection with finding a chapel in Monstone in France, and my Holy Grail documentary, which has nearly got 500,000 hits, which is nice, talks about these three places: the Bronze Age city, the Templar window with all its enigmatic symbols, and then this church in Monstone in the south of France, which has got a ceiling which is like 40-50 foot up in this small Templar chapel, which is just the most incredible experience. I've sent people there and they'd come away completely shocked at the energy and the sound when you sing in it. And on the ceiling of this chapel are all these really deep esoteric Templar symbols, and at the time nobody knew about this really. No one had even looked at it. But I looked at these symbols and they're node shapes. They're changing energies around a node. So these people knew about these energies. So that led off to the connection with the Templars, and so you can see the curiosity growing all the time. And at that point, you asked about the Emperor dragons, and I think the most significant thing about that was when we monitor these things, we notice these energies and their frequencies changing over time. But in 2017, everything changed. One person, Tim, who came to Spain with me, contacted me and said, have you seen what's going on with the lines? And I'm saying, what? He said, go and check them. And so I looked and I thought, oh my God, they're twice as wide. All the lines were twice as wide as they were before. So I sent a message out to several people I know and said, can you check the lines and confirm what you find? And we're getting messages, what's going on? What's happening? And so that then kicked off the next harmony period we had ended up being a bit longer than 3/4 of a day. It became a day and a half, and then it became 3 days, and then it became 6 days. So this length of harmony, when all the lines 4 times a year were moving side by side, that was getting shorter. That was getting longer. And we're now at 12 days long. This harmony period is now 12 days long. And it's probably December 24 when we're going to have full all year round harmony. These energy lines will all be one frequency. So instead of having all the different groups, we're just going to have one fundamental frequency. So we kind of have to look back now, well, what's generating this frequency? Why are these vibrations coming to the surface? And what are they? And what's making them? And but that story again could be read in Grail Bound, but essentially the most logical thing was it had to be coming from the center of the earth. And if vibrations are coming from the center of the earth, the only thing we could think of that was doing it was the inner core, which was solid, that was sitting inside the liquid outer core. And the iron and nickel in the inner core is a fantastically good transducer. They're used in microphones and speakers, and a transducer converts one form of energy to another. So it'll take electromagnetic energy from the outer core and convert it to very, very low frequency vibrations. And these spherical vibrations will expand outwards and they'll bounce off all the different density contrasts within the Earth. And of course, with the expansion and contraction in the inner core, you're getting these spherical waves, bubbles going out to the surface. And when you've got vibrations, you have high pressure and low pressure fronts. And I know it's like underground, because when you're working underground, we have basically mining is not easy, and there are parts of the time when you get what we call bumps. Bumps are like small earthquakes, mine-induced quakes, and you can be underground and get a bump, and you can hear it coming like a steam train. This sound travels through the rock, and it gets louder and louder and louder. When you're standing there, you just look upwards just to say, well, better check nothing's going to fall on me. And then it goes away, comes through, everything shakes, and it goes away. So this is the big longitudinal waves that travel through rock. So we know these vibrations will travel through rock, and you can hear them at the audible range. And that's the pressure front. But when you've got these spherical standing waves, the high pressure zones form linear features on the Earth's surface. And I think that's what we're picking up when we dowse. We're picking up the linear concentrations of the high pressure zones. And so when you've got two lines like this, and they're moving apart like that and back again, it's mirroring the expansion and contraction of the inner core. And they don't move all the same side like this and that. And of course, just like a loudspeaker, it can play various frequencies and sounds. The inner core is playing lots of frequencies. But the interesting thing about the inner core acting as a transducer is iron is also an incredibly good mechanical filter. And a mechanical filter filters out some frequencies. In other words, you won't get the full range of sound. It'll just give you what we call eigenmodes, peaks of frequencies in a certain range, and then nothing, and then peaks of frequencies in another range. And this is what we were finding with the Earth energies. You'd get them at 24 hours, 36 hours, 48-hour frequencies, and you get them at 12 hours and 16 hours, but you've got none at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, or 22 hours. There are no energy lines frequencies like that at all. And these eigenmodes, down at the microhertz level, these fundamental base frequencies were pumping out. Of course, at the higher harmonics of these, the octaves and the Pythagorean fifths, you're into the audible range. And this is why when we sing or make sounds with our musical instruments, and when we hit the precise higher harmonic of the fundamental from the center of the earth, and we sing or chant, that creates resonance with that fundamental frequency. And when you get that, you get this incredible uplifting feeling of everything vibrating. And of course, this is the sound that people were seeking, because that's the sort of sound that sort of opened all the doors, if you like, to the connections to the other worlds of spirit, which we can now accept as completely understandable and realistic, because Ron Pearson's theory explains how intelligence comes behind the universe. And when you start looking at what Tesla says, and other scientists like him are saying that everything is vibration, and vibration forms light, and light forms matter. So the ultimate of everything, and even down at the subquantum level, Ron's subquantum level, is it's all waves of vibration that generate these particles on the higher quantum level. And I won't go down into the science there, but of course, if you now think of vibration as not just vibration, but as the connection to the universal consciousness itself. So when you connect and in resonance with your body and the sound, that's directly connecting with the universal consciousness as well, this is the spiritual enlightenment the Templars had discovered. This is why the healers they knew about manifestation, they knew about all these things, and this is the secret. You have to get onto these energy line centers at the right times, and the Templars knew this. This is why they had their cathedrals orientated towards the solstices, like directions of solstice, and their special days were connected to the solar days. And this was the ancient pagan religions, which are the new religions have sought to try and overcome and stifle and suppress over these years, because they don't want you discovering that we are spiritual beings living a physical existence, and the route to connection is this through our inner spirituality. And that's actually really very simple to do if we just come together in groups and meditate and pray on these sacred times. So
can I butt in there? Honestly, you've got so much wisdom and knowledge to do with ley lines, song lines, grid points, and all of that. But I've often taken my gong on land in Australia, and we've done ceremony and drumming and all sorts of things. Have you ever measured before and after on a song line or a ley line, how it would have changed it in any way? You know, because I know there are parts of the earth that are in need of more light, should I say, that are, you know, you can walk in places, I know, because straight away I think, oh, you know, you just don't like the feel. So I know there are places that need cleansing and things like that. So have you ever measured anything from people doing, you know, because like we've all been to Stonehenge doing ceremony in Avebury and Glastonbury and, you know, changing frequencies and vibrations?
Yeah, you can measure the extent of the energy field before and afterwards. It's subjective, really. You need to be able to do this more double blind. Yeah, we do have an effect, but let's not get carried away here. We're insignificant little insects in this spiritual world, and our effect is next to nothing when you look at it. And as Jung tells us, when I came across Jung, that was just an amazing synchronicity as well. But he tells us we're tools of the numinous, you know, and not the other way around. So, you know, the order is over there, not here. And we're very much the servant, and need to be the servant, and to think that way. And you're very kind to say about the knowledge and the wisdom, but I'm just an accumulation of everybody else's work, which is what happens. And increasingly, we need to get out of the way of that if we want to connect. And I won't go down into. I've started these group discussion groups where we study Steiner and Jung's Red Book images, and it's just immense what these people have done. Goethe, they are giants in our world, which are just not being studied properly. But when you do bring people together, I would actually mention this as a way forward. This again, I talked about individual consciousness going to group consciousness. You know, we had a period of time where ego was important to explore, but now in group consciousness, you know, we're already beginning to recognize the power of working in groups. But when we start realizing each person has a part to play, and the really interesting thing about groups is that you need different people. You need unique identity and respecting each other's identity. The last thing you want to do is get a group of similar people thinking the same way because the group doesn't work. So but when you do get a group that works, when you've got all different people, probably you wouldn't people would socially mix with normally. Everyone's a bit weird, you know, in some ways, but that's what makes it work. You overcome that, and suddenly you get different perspectives on things. It's like they can tap into the subconscious in different ways from you. So when you look at an image of Jung's images, you can get that wonderful connection with the subconscious and creative ideas and inspiration. But when you do that collectively, you get a three-dimensional perspective of insights from the subconscious. And if you're looking for guidance, if we're looking for edging our way forward, it's now almost definitely this is to do with groups, forming dream groups, meditation groups, and looking to connect up to share what's learned. Because when we start doing that, we're beginning to have huge influence over people's lives and directions, and in a really positive way. It's changing people's lives, and I think that's what's needed right now. We need something to get around and gather around, so that people realize that the insignificance of what life is really all about, and that it is not that it's just when you're dead, you're dead. You know, we're in huge life cycles of again and again and again, where we're learning, developing, and growing, and that's the purpose. In fact, it's the one thing about life that's common to all life, and that's growth. So the purpose of life is growth, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. And once you begin to realize that, you think, whoa, okay, do I want to come back and do all this again? Or do I want to evolve and carry on? And then this takes you to the Cathars and their view of becoming a perfect person. And of course, Jung was just massively into the Cathars, and he was very much changed over his life from being Orthodox Christian to more Gnostic Christianity. But that's a subject which is just completely glossed over by the mainstream now, which is trying to plug gaps all over the place at the moment as people are seeking out knowledge and wisdom elsewhere from their particular sources. But coming back to the what's going on now and the Emperor Dragons in 2017, not only did we discover these lines were widening and the harmony times were extending, there was a bit of a shock when we realized that another Emperor Dragon had arrived on Earth, and we needed to look at, well, how can that happen? And I talked earlier about the energies source being derived from the outer core and the natural electromagnetism of the Earth. Well, we also have the sun's energies, and they're getting to the Earth. In particular, it's cosmic energy, and when cosmic energy hits the Earth in the atmosphere, it changes to neutrinos and gamma rays. And gamma ray radiation is causing huge problems in the world at the moment. But we're not discussing that because the sort of problems you get are lung inflammation from radiation. That's why Brazil's having such bad problems with lung inflammation at the moment, and lung problems. But the neutrinos go straight through and impart energy to the inner core, and that adds to the energy, and that has expanded. And one of the reasons why we get the type 4 lines is they're connected to the sun. But the Emperor Dragons seem to come from more galactic sources. And this is where it becomes really quite interesting, is because if you imagine we've had like 3 suns giving us 3 Emperor Dragons, 3 galactic sources. But we can't see those suns, they're too far away, but they're cosmic energies giving us neutrinos, and it's being projected in these vibrations on the surface, which are showing up in what we call the Emperor Dragons. But what's happening right now, and this is, again, it's something that really needs to be pushed out a bit more, is that our Earth's magnetic field is dropping off. It's really, I mean, it's 5% per year, it's decreasing. And this Earth's magnetic field is being driven downwards, if you like, because of the proximity of the solar system to something called the galactic current sheet, which we now know we pass through roughly every 12,000 years. And when that happens, this galactic current sheet, which is a mixture of dust, cosmic energy, and plasma, and in the middle of the plasma, there's this reversal zone of positive and negative. And this drives pretty much everything that we come across with how it affects the sun and how it affects the Earth. And as a geologist, we've known that the polar reversals, magnetic reversals, roughly every 200,000 or 300,000 years on the Earth. And you can do that by measuring paleomagnetism and the way the ferromagnetic minerals cool. They'll cool in a position which is orientated towards where the North Pole is. When you do an analysis of rocks, you can see that sometimes these minerals point towards the North Pole, sometimes they point towards the South Pole, which indicates we're going through these magnetic reversals. And when that happens, there's a lot of things that go on, but for it to happen, the magnetic field drops. And we can take our signs from how it happens from the sun. The sun has a magnetic field, North Pole and the South Pole, and that switches every 11 years on the sun. The North Pole and the sun and the South Pole actually start coming together on the one side. As the field drops, it comes together, and as it comes together, the North Pole, the other one pops up the other side, and then the reversal continues around. Which way am I going? And it's the same on the Earth. The field's dropping rapidly. I mean, the South Magnetic Pole has left Antarctica. I mean, I just couldn't believe I read that. Well, why isn't this world news? You know, and then, but the magnetic fields which shield us from cosmic energy. So we're getting so much more cosmic energy through. And it's the same thing in space with the interstellar magnetic fields in space. It shields us from cosmic energy from these galactic centers. So when you haven't got these magnetic fields, cosmic energy gets through. This is why we get suddenly another energy line pops up at Emperor Dragon, because suddenly this cosmic energy is getting through to us and being converted to neutrinos. And we had this one which in 2017 November, December came along, which ran from the North Pole to the South Pole, which absolutely matched the prophecy of the twins in Hopi Indian Blue Star Katrina prophecy. And that was when the twins arrived, the god of the North Pole, Palangahoya, and South Pole, Pogonhoya. 7 years from that will be the point where there'll be the start of the purification. And I won't go into the prophecy bit, but it seemed to match the god of the North Pole or the South Pole was the god of sound, would you believe, as well. But then after that one arrived, another one arrived, and then lastly, in 2018, the sixth Emperor Dragon arrived. So we now have 6 Emperor Dragons, 6 sources of energy now getting through, and it's increased the energies massively in the world, and there's groups of us who are busily now have been working to connect up these grids with the other grids. And when I'm talking about connecting up grids, and you mentioned about cleaning sites and cleansing sites with sound, I mean, that's a huge area, which is we couldn't do it justice in 2 hours. But what we discovered with regards to nodes were, if you want these energy shapes to work as they should, you need symmetry, you need balance, which is what nature tells us anyway in so many ways. And when you've got equal numbers of these earth energy lines crossing over in one point, you end up with what's called a cylinder of energy, and this cylinder of energy goes up into the air and down into the ground, and only when you have a cylindrical cylinder, or pretty much cylindrical, all the little vortices that occur inside, they will combine, just like in water, and you'll find a whirlpool, and just like in air you'll find a tornado. You need a containment field for these vortices to become bigger and larger, and as soon as you've got a big enough vortex within the containment field, at the harmony times, it collapses into a double torus. And that double torus is now something we see mirrored in life in the universe at the high level and the small level. And because that is the shape where they're the portals, they're the gates where you can connect to. They have some phenomenal features that toruses do. Essentially, when we hit one vibration, December 24, we're going to have a double torus field every node all around the world, and at that point is the start of our learning process. It's like the gates are fully formed, the energy is there. When we go there regularly, we will have accelerated learning into group consciousness. So from that point on, I mean, it's getting exciting now, but from that point on, we're going to be, for instance, we're beginning to sense telepathy more easily. We're becoming more intuitive. Empathy is increasing, and empathy, by the way, is a big problem in the world for the leaders at the moment, because we can feel lies, and feeling lies is makes it even easier to know we're being lied to. So this is.
I just want to break in now. Hey,
right.
Just interesting about the magnetic field, because I was looking at the fact that when you have the face of the engine, when you take out the radiator, you'll see a harmonic balancer. And it's almost like if you get the top of the planet and you look down on it, and you can see how the major plates of Australia, Africa, and South America has been spinning out, and it's created a triangulated spot on the southern hemisphere. Now, those 3 continents all deal in iron ore. Yeah. And when you start looking at Western Australia, which is just pumping out 250,000 tons of iron ore, that has a magnetic field resonance for the southern part of the hemisphere, and it gets shipped up into the northern hemisphere to Japan and Korea and China, there must be a change in the actual magnetic field, because you've got all this iron ore that's calibrated to the southern hemisphere going up to the northern hemisphere. It's almost like you get 2 magnets coming together, north and south, and they get this attraction. Is it possible that that's creating a shift in both the north and south poles?
To be honest, I don't think it's going to be a big enough effect. It will have an effect, but it's a question of how big an effect that is. I think the when you start to look at the galactic nature of the power from the plasma, and this is to do with the electric universe theory, our environment is really controlled and dominated not by Earth, not even by the sun, but by the galactic center, and that space weather, if you like, is what drives the changes on our Earth more than anything, and bigger than anything we can possibly do ourselves. So yes, it will have a small effect locally, and the people living local to that will quite possibly notice it in a variety of ways, depending on how sensitive they are. But from the point of view of us trying to change the magnetic field that's really going on, the big shift that's going on, I don't think we're going to be able to do that in anything we do. Fact,
well, I've noticed that every time I've flown up in the northern hemisphere, if I fly Australia through the Middle East and go to the UK, I can arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning. I can go through the whole day without any jet lag. Yeah. But if I come the opposite from UK to Australia, coming through the Middle East, man, it wipes me out for about a week because I'm going counter-cycle to the spin of the bloody planet. Does that have an effect on our own magnetic fields that we have within ourselves? I mean, birds and other animals do have a magnetic field resonance for navigation, just looking at how it actually affects my body.
I think there's certainly something in this. As soon as you take yourself out of what you're used to doing, out of what you've evolved to be able to do and live in, and that is partly to do with the traveling in a particular direction around the world, and against time, you certainly are going to throw your internal clock out, your internal mechanisms for it. So yeah, absolutely. And also with regards to locally where you live and where you're used to, you'll be connecting to those energies. And if you're suddenly thrust into completely different energies and you're not ready for it, especially when you're tired, that'll affect you as well.
Which then leads on to your food source, isn't it? So if you're actually getting your food from the earth, whether it's from under the ground or above the ground, or you're reaching up for it from a tree, then obviously there's a magnetic field or an energy field or Taurus, as you mentioned. It's an effect on that, so that you become one with that particular.
What we have to be careful of, really careful of, is falling for the illusion that matter is real. And what I mean by that is, if you start looking at anything that we're standing on or sitting on or anything like that, what we eat, this is just a collection of molecules with atoms and electrons and particles. But when you dig down into look at what a particle is, it's nothing but energy. And this energy, from one perspective, the current science doesn't explain where this energy comes from at all. But Ron's theory suggests that below the quantum level, there's just one final sub-quantum level where everything is created through this intelligence. And it directs its waves, its vibrations, to peak. And where they peak, just like two waves will hit each other, they'll peak. It'll produce the illusion of a matter particle on the quantum level. And it can produce several different quantum worlds, all within the same space, but on different frequencies. So you've got essentially several quantum worlds, all existing on different frequencies in exactly the same area. But it's all an illusion. It's all energy. It's only our minds that tune into the particular matter frequency world that we're in that makes us think that we're living in a physical solid world. So that even stems down to electromagnetism, which ultimately is light, and light is generated, as we know, by vibration. So we can very easily get trapped into thinking that the things like electromagnetism are real, when really they're just nothing more than symbols of signs of change. And what's changing now is the way our minds tune into all these different worlds, and this veil of illusion is coming down, and we're going to be seeing all these worlds soon. And it's going to be quite shocking. And some people are already seeing this, because that tuning element in our mind will be expanded massively to be able to be sensitive and aware to all these different frequencies, because all the frequencies are becoming one frequency. So for us to think that the driving forces are electromagnetism and light and other physical forces, we're going to be finding the true nature of reality is really very different, and our ability to do things will be changed. And you only have to look back at the past and see, how some of these people in our ancestors built, for instance, these 100-ton boulder walls, which perfectly polygonal masonry, which fit perfectly together, and they have this sort of molding look to it as well. And this is found in Peru. It's found we find polygonal and very well good put together masonry in Egypt, in Greece, in Italy, in Japan, all around the world. Our ancients had abilities and techniques which we still can't explain today. And yet how? When we're constrained with matter being solid and heavy and we can't do anything with it, and we have a limited capacity with our minds to be able to think and adapt and work with these things, I think we'll find that it won't be long before these new skills and abilities, which are latent right now, will be on the rise again. So to answer your questions, yes, there's all those sort of possibilities, but I think there's something bigger at play here.
So let's come back to your dowsing. I mean, were you using a tree bro, or were you using metal rods, or were you using wooden rods, timber rods?
Good question, because it really is nothing to do with the rods. In fact, I tell people to say the rod is going to be your crutch. I mean, it is between a connection between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind. It's about how do you connect the two up? How do you get information back? And there's a friend of mine who's a dream detective who has symbols that he's preset, so that he knows if he dreams certain symbols, his subconscious mind can give him the information back through his dreams with those symbols. And that's why he can dream where he's going to be going the next day, what he's going to see the next day. And he's worked for MI5, MI6, and the American intelligence services, because he's incredibly accurate, and he's been tested at the University of Arizona. Chris Robinson's his name. But anyway, we're creating the same symbols with our rods. Straightforward is yes, or is no, sorry. Then across the chest is yes, and that's no, yes. So it's a simple yes, no. You can use a pendulum and get different movements to mean yes and no. And some people will be clockwise for yes, and sometimes it'll be clockwise for no. But it's how we program our minds to get this information back. So we can use a stick, and a stick which will spring upwards will be our yes, or it will not do it, that'll be our no. You can use a pendulum, you can use a rod. I just use one coat hanger. But you can use your fingers like this, you can move your fingers like that, where you slightly extra pressure and they stick, that's your yes. Okay, so it's about building up the symbolism so your subconscious can give you the information back that you're asking for, what you hope to, so there's important things about moving from focus state to aware state. So you ask your question in a focus state, then you get out of your head, lose your ego, create the uncertainty, just ask to get some sort of truth rather than the answer to your question. And then the other big thing is you have to not care. And so you set up the way you connect with your subconscious mind through your dowsing. And from the point of view of water and earth energies, what you're doing is you're asking for your subconscious to connect your energy field with the energy field that you're looking for. Maybe it's water, maybe it's oil, maybe it's gold, or a particular frequency of earth energies. Now, you know that the water frequency has a vibrational field, it has an electromagnetic field, it has a gravitational field. This collective field, 30 feet below the surface, will be felt by your own collective field, your gravitational field, electromagnetic field, and your vibratory field. So like waves interact. We can't see them, but all you have to do is just show me if I'm interacting with the water, any water underneath me. And then you get out of the way, and the answer will be yes or no, if you programmed yourself to the frequency of that water in the first place. So what you're getting is and by the way, that's why water and earth energies are much easier to douse, because our bodies have water and energy, and it's easier for us to connect to the subconscious to give us information like that. So it doesn't matter what you use. And in fact, I took a group of shamans from America around Bath, right? I run dowsing courses, and they chucked their rods away after, well, they didn't, they gave them back to me. They didn't need them after an hour and a half, because what we've done is we associated the feeling of a particular frequency of energy line with an area in their body, and they gave it a color. So they could turn their bodies on, and when they walked into an energy line, they would get a color and a feeling in a particular part. So they knew they were in a certain frequency of energy line.
Yeah, because you are the pendulum, aren't you? When you're in tune, you know, you just know, you can feel. But I was going to ask, we went to Flinders Rangers in South Australia, or to Grid Point 44. So that's apparently where all the lines meet in one point. Is that correct?
Well, the first thing is you couldn't get all the lines meeting in one point. There's just so many energy lines. And when we talk about the rarest lines, the type 5 lines, you've got 2 pairs already that run across Australia. You might have to put that slide up, because there's the rainbow serpent that runs across, and then there's another one that runs across pretty much below Darwin up to the top of Queensland. And where they cross is the well-known Uluru. And that last one, which from Darwin, not Darwin, from Britain, Darwin, Perth, sorry, from Perth up to just below Perth, up to Queensland. That's one that reappeared. It's one of the 3 that reappeared in the last few years. That big ceremony that they had January last year was connecting up those emperor dragons at Uluru. There was the wisdom keepers there did that. But the less rare lines are the type 4 lines. There are about 14 pairs of lines in the UK, to give you an example of that. But then you've got the type 3 lines, which are much more numerous, and the type 2 and type 1 lines, again, a lot more of them. So you're talking about a huge number of smaller lines. I call smaller because they're narrower widths and they have slightly higher frequencies. So there's no one place where you'll have all the lines. For instance, at Uluru, you're going to have probably 100 pairs of lines all crossing over there, but that's mirrored in 7 or 8 other places around the world on land anyway. So that I call those first order nodes. So if you've got a place like Flinders, and I don't know that very well, there will almost certainly be very, very powerful energy lines there. The type 4 lines probably. The question, more important, is whether or not there's the right configuration of lines at a particular point, because if you haven't got symmetry, then you're not going to get the energy formations. And having said that, there's 1 or 2 types of frequencies of lines which don't sit very well with some humans. They can be quite jarring. It's like hearing the nails being drawn across a blackboard. It's a sound which is horrible. And living across those for a long period of time aren't very nice. And that's an issue, because we found that certain groups of more devious, pernicious people tend to like working with those frequencies, and we have to work carefully with that. So I don't know if that answers your question, Beth.
Yeah, so there, obviously in your books there's a lot more information, because I haven't read any of your books. I only came across you since I've been back in the UK. And people, when I said I was looking for people that are like yourself, dreaming the new dream and enlightening humanity. So I would like to get your books and have a read through. So that would be a good starting point for people to have more of awareness of ley lines, dragon lines, and all sorts of things like that, and where places are to go and be, because like you can sit in some places and the energy, it's just, I've gone to so many places. Oh my God, you just feel such a sense of peace in different places, and it's like you don't want to move. You're just totally at one in that energy.
And I'm glad you mentioned that last part. I mean, at the moment, I'm beginning to get a website, a new website for enabling people to find where these special places are near to where they are. And then it'll be an interactive website where people can form groups for meditations at these local sites. It'll have, because it takes a long time to find all these sites. But there's going to be a place where you can go to, and eventually more and more information will be added to it, so you'll know where to go to find these places, and people will be able to help do that. But thank you for mentioning the books. On my website, roryduff.com, there's also plenty of information which is for free. There's videos, there's PDF downloads. I do a post every week on social media sites, and there's newsletters. There's newsletters on my website, past newsletters, which will keep you going for months.
Yeah, yeah.
It actually comes to the point, actually, and this is, we're talking about coming to dreaming the new dream. You know, it's like going into a library, like New York Library, and there's like thousands and thousands of books, and you ask, well, which one should I read? How do you decide what to do next? You can't read them all. You literally can't. So, you know, it isn't about just reading all my books. It's not going to be, you know, that's not what you should be doing. You should be guided through synchronicity to think, that's what I need to do next. And after a while, when you meditate, at least meditate, you understand that you can manifest pretty much anything you want. It doesn't mean you say you should. So all you're left with is, well, if I'm supposed to be learning, and my one fundamental reason for life is to learn, develop, and grow, then how can I do that best? And more to one point, how do I help others do that? And then just say, well, just show me the synchronicity and help me explore it. Because as soon as you start doing that, you're guided down into just a phenomenal world where everything starts helping you. You're going with the flow, and people come into your life with information which is relevant and timely, and other things will pop up. It's just mind-blowing. I mean, and the symbolism, how I discovered, I mean, I've known about Jung's work for some time. I never studied it. But when I suddenly came across his images in his red book, and saw the connection with geobiology, and that's what I'm studying now, geobiology, which is how life affects, the Earth affects life, and that's literally how the Earth is resonating and changing its resonance, and how it's affecting us in a variety of different ways. And Jung is just, he's found ways of tapping into the subconscious, and he was a prophet. He knew he was a prophet. He said it nearly made him go mad, but he hadn't realized he was a prophet. He wouldn't have actually gone on to doing the rest of his studies and developed his psychoanalysis work. But he also predicted a snippet of this universal prophecy, like Goethe did with the fairy tale and the green snake crossing between the land of the senses and the land of the spirit. There's the snippets of this universal property everywhere, and this is the thing which drives him more than anything else, is because we have this potential evolution of consciousness sitting there, which we can get onto. All we need to do is to come together at sacred sites local to us and meditate in groups and connect with these energies. Let the energies guide us. The Gnostic Gospels talk about the Garden of Eden story in a completely different way. The serpent isn't evil. The serpent is synonymous and a symbol for these earth energy lines. The serpent was known as the instructor, the teacher around the tree of knowledge. And it was the instructing principle. There's a male and female instructing principle that come up through you and connect, the Kundalini forces that connect with the earth energies and the energies from the sun. And when we do that, we're getting all this information coming through.
There, while you're, I'm going to put in there, one of our listeners, Andrew, and I keep seeing he puts comments up, but I can't take on board all the comments. So perhaps Jeff I know there's a couple of questions that he'd asked or mentioned, if perhaps you could share that.
He wanted to know if the ancient pyramids create or manipulate the Leylines, and the dolmens, which you find up in Russia and that, are they also on the Leylines as well?
Yeah, let's take the pyramids. The pyramids at Giza, they're on a fourth order node. There are two pairs of type 4 lines crossing over there, along with lots of others. The pyramids themselves don't manipulate the lines. The main function of the pyramid is to anchor the node in place so that people can conduct ceremonies on the node inside the chambers. And they weren't chambers for burials, but for Egyptian pharaohs, they were very much chambers for incubatory journeys to these other worlds. The pyramid's main function was to keep that energy node where it was. Manipulating energy is very simple. you just commit atrocities and sacrifices on them, and the extreme negative emotion will make the lines move away, which is why you find in places like Chichen Itza in Mexico, the new dominating power with their new religions would break down the pre-existing pagan religions by creating sacrifices on top of these pyramids, and that depowered the area massively, because suddenly you don't have the symmetry of the energies, and you have a tic-tac-toe crossing as opposed to a point where all the energies come together to create a cylinder of energy. And if you haven't got the cylinder of energy, you haven't got the torus, you haven't got the torus, you haven't got the connection to the other side, or a clear connection. So the pyramids were very, very powerful places, but the place itself, funnily enough, is not the only function of power. It's just the connection with people. You need people and places, conscious interaction at these sites. That's what creates the power. You can have the most powerful site in the world, but if no one goes there, it does not do too much. Or you can have a small, wonderful type 1 vortex, beautiful, delicate energies, very often connected with small chapels and divine feminine. You get people regularly meditating there, praying there, and they can blossom out, make a huge difference over the area. And I know that's subjective. I can't measure it, but we do know there's anecdotal evidence. For instance, a group of people in the UK back in the 80s did some work in Brighton and worked at the fountain in Brighton and cleansed the energies, or worked on the energies, or meditated on the energies there. And there are good police records to show afterwards that crime dropped significantly in that area. And that was the fountain project. So we can make a big difference, definitely. So that was the pyramids. So energies can be manipulated, but they're by us and human interaction, not the actual pyramids as well. And there may be other functions in the pyramids, but and the other one about dolmens tend to be several functions with dolmens. Again, they can anchor lines in certain ways. They can keep them from moving away, but they are also waystones to show where lines are heading. One of the things we found is there's a big connection with pilgrimages around the world to ancient sites. If you take the Camino Way that goes to Santiago de Compostela, which is one of the top 5 Christian sites in the world. 3 of them are in Spain, by the way, and one of them was that word Caravaca de la Cruz, which hardly anyone knows about. But there were many lines, energy lines, going to the node at Santiago de Compostela, and the pilgrims would walk the lines. The ancient Celts would migrate along these straight lines, and in Santiago de Compostela, they have this scallop-shaped shell as a sign. If you look at a scallop shell, it's like a half circle with these ribbed lines coming across to the umbra in the middle, and those ribs of the scallop shell actually are signifying the different energy lines as they come towards the center. And you think of places like Avebury, they will be following dolmens. That's their route, and all the tribes would come together probably once every 4 years or 4 times every year, I don't know. They would all come to congregate at their sacred site, and they would follow the lines in a sort of pilgrimage. So dolmens, I think, can be used inside a sacred site, but they can be used, and I often find when I'm tracking them, you'll find a lone stone in the middle of nowhere that the line will run through.
Amazing. Gosh, so much. I didn't want to interrupt you. You know, you've got but you've got such a flow of information that I'm happy just to sit and listen. But obviously,
you do ask more. Fine. Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, no, but thank you for sharing. It's been amazing. Yeah, I've loved listening and understanding more. And you know what I loved, you mentioned about synchronicity, and I know for me lately, synchronicity has been happening, and I think when you recognize it, I think, oh, that's synchronous. It happens more and more, and when you've got that awareness, then it's just like you're on that treadmill then of things opening up more and more.
I do need to mention about synchronicity though, and it is connected with this path of learning and development, the Cathar route of trying to become a better person. It can be called the Grail path, the vocational path, and Jung calls it the path of individuation. It's the birthing of the divine child within you. But this is all a path which is not just all bed and roses. They're going to lead you to challenges on purpose. because that's the way they develop and change you, and get around your weaknesses or your or the areas you need to be improved on, if you like, in this development. And I can't really go into it now, but I think that mankind is going on its own collective journey, and we are being subjected to the same sort of abyss, darkness, the gap between the worlds, if you like, where we're being tested so that we can become better and more prepared, if you like, for what we're about to go through, which is this amazing transformation. So it's a difficult path. I mean, Jung said the path of individuation was the hardest path you could ever choose in life. But there are a few who are awakening now, who are choosing now to take that hard path because they know that's the right route. That ultimately means we can help everybody else. So we don't need everybody. We don't need everybody at all. We just need 1% of the world to, and we're already doing this. So we're already, there's 1% of the world who are regularly meditating and praying, wanting world peace, wanting the world to become better. But for me, the key is to do it at the right time in the right place. And that's getting people to these symmetrical sacred sites and embracing the change and being guided by what comes through from the subconscious, the numinous.
Right. Well, I think on that note, we could go on and on and on. So I think, yes, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And it's just been really, really awesome.
Well, it's very kind of you, and thank you, Jeff, Andrena, for allowing me the time to talk as much. Sorry, I just
No, it's absolutely fine. That's what we're here for, to help others to learn about different things. I mean, I've only been doing this a couple of months, and I've had some amazing speakers, and everybody's got unique gifts in different ways, and it's all about sharing your passion, what you're good at, and how you can help other people.
That's a really important thing. You say we have to respect each other's journeys and help each other to have those journeys, because collectively we need everybody to go on their journey, because then we can come together and as a community we don't have like 8 blacksmiths and 10 carpenters and no cooks.
That actually leads me on to getting David Burke. He's Australia's foremost engram proponent. So he just listens to you, and he can actually tell you whether you're a 1 or a 9. And so he gets invited to come into businesses that might be advertising agencies. So he knows they're a 7. That's all about creativity and open floor plan, and they can come in their own hours and stuff. But if you get someone who's a 5 and make them the CEO, that's someone who's like MI5 and MI6 have got little security things, and you only go in, you only get so much information. So that type of individual is not going to work for that particular organization. He's an interesting guy. So engrams, it's called. And I suppose that's bringing people together in what you're saying to create community, isn't it?
Well, we're learning about the power of 12 at the moment. Jean-Michel wrote this great book called 12 Tribe Nations, and it touches on the importance of 12 being found in cultures all around the world. And what we're discovering in group meditation is that individually there are almost 12 different functions or combinations of functions. And when you come together and you each know the function you should be doing, for instance, balancing the amount of energy coming down with the amount of energy coming up, there's a function for working with the rotation of energy. There's a function for anchoring the energy. I mentioned anchoring before. And there's a way of working with energy we're still discovering, but within groups of 12s. And I met with an amazing Polynesian lady over in Carlsbad last year in February in California. And we had to meet to discuss what she knew and she came from a long line of shamanic priestesses from the island of Guam. And she was talking about ceremonies that they would do and the importance of the roles and what we play. So we're just still discovering more information about that. But yeah, that was just 12. But what your chap's on about is spot on. We all are different for a purpose. Yeah.
Well, perhaps we could ask you to come back another time later on in the year, next year, and share more information.
Brilliant.
Well, let's see how this one goes first. You might not get me.
No, that's good. That's good. Yep.
Oh, no. Yeah, all good.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jeffrey.